So then we'll start the today's lesson. We are discussing checks, and please unmute your mics now, right? When you have a question, you can unmute your mics and then ask a question. If you have any question, then and there you can ask. That's all right. Please, everyone, mute your phone. Microphone now. I can hear some noises. Right, thank you. Okay, we'll start. The topic that we are going to discuss today is checks. Last week we discussed, you remember, under the negotiable instrument, the first part we discussed bills of exchange. Today the other negotiable instrument that we are going to discuss, that is well familiar to you, especially to the bankers and others also. We are talking about the checks today. So we are going to discuss the law related to checks. Okay, first one, slides. What is a check? So this is the definition given in the bills of exchange ordinance for checks. Remember, negotiable instrument, the law related to negotiable instrument is mentioned in the bills of exchange ordinance. That includes law related to checks. Checks, there is no specific act for checks. Checks also governed by the bills of exchange ordinance. So there is a definition given in the bills of exchange ordinance for checks. Any instrument coming under this definition, definition can be considered as a check. So that you have to remember. So the definition is very important, that you have to remember the definition. The definition for check is, a check is a bill of exchange drawn on a banker payable on demand. That is the general definition given there, right? What does it mean, right? You remember the last day that we discussed bills of exchange ordinance. In a bill of exchange, bill, it has three parties. You remember? Drawer, drawee, and the payee. These are the parties of a bill, right? Drawer gives an order to the drawee to pay certain amount of money, to the payee. So this is the bill of exchange. The definition of the check is, it's a bill of exchange drawn on a bank, right? So always in a check, the drawee is a bank, right? When it is a check, the drawee always is a bank, and the drawer is always a current account holder of a bank, right? So on this basis, we can define a check as a bill of exchange written on a bank, So that definition that you have to remember. A check is an unconditional order in writing signed by the drawer, right? Drawn on a bank, the drawee is always a bank, to pay a sum certain in money. The amount that you have to mention in a certain value, right? Payable on demand, that you have to compare this with the bill of exchange, right? Remember, bill has a maturity date, right? Bill of exchange has a maturity date. The payment due after the maturity date. Check is payable on demand. So there's a difference there. In favor of a specific person, that is the payee, or to his order, or in favor of the bearer. So that is the definition, longer definition that we can give to the check. So when we go through it again, right? Check is an unconditional order, right? You can't put conditions when you are writing a check, right? You can't say pay 500 rupees if payee pass the exam. That's a conditional. So you can't put condition in a check. That's a fundamental law principle that you have to remember. And check is always in writing. It has to be in writing. That means there has to be a physical document. Physical document. So for the time being, at least it is in writing. We don't know in future whether it will change or not. However, as per the bills of exchange ordinance, check has to be in writing and the signed by the drawer, that is the account holder has to sign, and the check is drawn on the bank, that is drawee, always a bank, right? So these are the condition or the definition of the check. Then I have given some points there in this next slide. Law applicable to checks. The checks and bills of exchange both are governed by Bills of Exchange Ordinance number 25 of 1927. So you have to remember there is no separate law for checks. Checks are also governed by the same Bills of Exchange Ordinance, right? Then we say check has a dual aspect. What do you mean by a dual aspect? It's like this. It is subject to Bills of Exchange Ordinance and it is considered as a negotiable instrument. That is one point, right? Considered as a negotiable instrument. So therefore, it can be considered as a bill of exchange written on a bag. It is also, that is one aspect. The other aspect is the check can be considered as an instruction or rather mandate issued by the customer to the bank, to pay an amount stated or no after the date of mention. So that is the other aspect. That means your check can be considered as a bill of exchange, or check can be considered as a mandate or as an instruction given by the customer to the bank to debit this account and pay a certain amount of money. So those are the two aspects of the bill of the check, right? Bill of exchange has only one aspect. It only considered as a negotiable instrument. Then printed check forms. This is another important thing that you have to remember. The question is when a customer issue checks, whether he is supposed to issue checks on printed form, or in other words, whether customer can use some other paper, which is not the printed form, to issue a check. So what is the answer, right? Printed check forms, as per practice, banking issue printed check forms, check books to the customer. So we know that as bankers, we use printed check forms. We give printed check books to the customers, right? At the time of opening the account, customer agrees to use only the printed check form. So we know the law is this. It is not necessary to issue the checks in the check forms, or rather check leaves given by the bank. Now see the definition given in the Bills of Exchange Ordinance. Bills of Exchange Ordinance says check is an unconditional order in writing to the bank to pay a certain sum of money. So in the definition, nowhere it says that it has to be in the given format. There is no format specified in the bills of exchange ordinance. So therefore, it is not a legal requirement. I'm stressing again, it is not a legal requirement to use check leaf or check books to issue checks, right? That means a customer even can take a A4 sheet and write a check or draw a check in a A4 sheet, technically, or rather legally. But we have issues now. If we get a check like that, written on a A4 sheet, can we accept it? We have practical problems, right? We have uh, the settlement system, so the computer system. So those computer systems will not recognize this A4 sheet check as a check unless it is presented, the check is presented in the given format. So customer has a right under the law to issue the check in writing in any form. So then how can we bound the customer, or how can we force the customer to issue checks in the given format or given check leaf? It is at the time of we opening the current account with the customer, we put a condition in the mandate or terms and conditions, account operation terms and conditions, that the customer obliged to issue checks on a given leaf, check leaf. So he signed the terms. So then he is bound to issue checks on the given checkbooks and check leaves, right? So that is very important. Or otherwise, if this condition is not there, customer can issue check in any form, in any paper. What is required under the law is it has to be an unconditional, it has to be an unconditional order in writing, right? So remember, the customer who has more than one, at the time of opening the account, customer agrees to use printed check forms. Customers have to use the printed check forms given to them. So at the time of opening the account, he agreed by an agreement, signing the terms and conditions. So therefore, he has to issue checks on the given format. A customer who has more than one current account cannot use a check form issued by one account to issue checks from the other account. So this is another another thing that we have to think about. If customer has more than one account, if we have given a checkbook to a particular account, can he use the check leaf to issue checks from the other account? That is also not possible. Now it is anyway not possible because the account number is printed there. So however, that is not also possible as per the terms and condition that he has agreed with the bank at the time of opening the account. Next, I have given a picture of a check. So I have marked certain points there. Those are the points very important in a check. Right? There are other features also, but these are the important points that I have marked as number 1 to number 7. Right? Number 1 is the number 1 I have given here as the drawee. Right? Then number 2 is the payee. Number 3, date of the check. Number 4, amount. Amount you can see it mentioned in words and also in figures. Then number 5 is the drawer. Number 6 is the signature of the drawer. Then you can see number 7. We call it MIC or magnetic ink characters. You can see there are a few numbers are there, right? Check number is mentioned there. Branch code is, sort code is there, and account number is also there. Now, can you tell me which number is essential or important or must in a check? Can you unmute your phone, microphone and answer? What is the most or what is the must? What number must be in the checkbook and why? Can anyone answer? No one want to answer. What number is important? No one wants to answer. Okay, right. That now, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. The important number, I think, is the check number.
It's a check number. Okay, why do you think it's check number, not two other numbers?
Check number is unique to that, that instrument. Only through that number only you can identify it. Others are also important because it's the bank number and the account number.
Yes, but it is important. The other two numbers are important to the bank for the process.
Yeah.
Right? Check number is important, as you said. It is a unique number to the check leave, right? And it is important to identify the check. As you said, that is correct. Yes. Why do you want to identify? Why do you say it is important? Hello?
Yeah, say if you want to stop the check. So without the number, you can't do that.
Exactly. That's the exact question, that answer that I want, right? Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going back to mute because I'm at a place where it's very noisy.
Yeah, yes, please. Okay. Yes. Right. As that gentleman said, customer can at any time stop the payment of the check. So when he give instructions to the bank to stop the check, that we call it countermanding. When he countermand the check, that he has to mention specially the check number, right? So that is very important when it comes to law, right? So if we pay a countermanded check, the bank is liable. So if customer has not given the instruction properly, especially if he has not mentioned the check number, if we have only mentioned the date and the value, right, that is not proper instruction. That is not considered as a proper instruction to stop the check. So then we have a protection. So therefore, check number is important in a check to identify the check. When customer give instructions to the bank, especially, he gives instructions to stop the account. So stop the payment. The other two numbers, branch, sort code, and account number, is for the purpose of the bank, or used for the bank, that we can identify the bank branch and also easily identify the account. So our processes, as a help to our processes, that we have included these two numbers there, right? So then we go to the next slide, right? One important law point is a check must be in writing. Check must be in writing. What do you mean by in writing? Do you mean that it has to be written in ink, or what is the method, or what are the method that we can use to write a check, right? Ideally, it should be written in ink, or it can be typewritten. This is the ideal way. So what about if customer use a pencil? If you use a pencil to write the check means the printed form is there, he fills the blank by using a pencil. what is the situation? Have you ever come across a situation like this? If a customer presented a check written by using a pencil, written in pencil, what do? Do you say the customer that check is invalid or check is not, check is void? Right? The law says, right, may be accepted. May be accepted mean the check is legally valid. So don't say, since it is written in pencil, the check is invalid. It's wrong. May be accepted means it is valid. May be accepted means that you have to do certain, you have to take certain precautions, you have to follow certain steps before you pay. So what are the steps that you have to follow? That is there, right? But if there is a reason to suspect, the banker should not pay such check without confirmation from the drawer. So if you have any reason to suspect, if you see that it has been altered, erased and written again, right? If you observe anything like that, or if it is suspicious, for example, third party brings a cash check written in pencil, right, and sign in pencil. So suspicious. So in a situation like that, what is the procedure to follow? You have to get a confirmation from the customer account holder. So you have to contact the account holder, get a confirmation. If he says, he confirmed the check and I request you to pay, then you can pay. Remember, the bankers are protected under law if you have done your payment or collection without negligence in good faith. Those are the most important two things that you have to look into. You have to follow. Without negligence, in good faith. We are going to discuss later what is both those conditions that we are going to discuss. So remember that. What about the printed check forms? The banker refused to honor the check which is not drawn on a printed check form. The banker should give reasonable notice to the customer. That means, in other words, the customer can use any type of paper to draw a check. So it is not a must to issue a check in a given check leaf.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Now, if a customer issued a check written on a red ink or let's say green, there's no legal bar of paying that, no?
I can't hear properly. Can you repeat the question slowly?
No. If a customer drawn a check by using a red ink or green ink, there's no legal bar of making the payment. No, we can pay that.
Color, you mean the color?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good question. There is no definition. Ink means he can use any ink, any color, right? So I have faced certain situations. Sometimes bankers say the bankers use red color, others has to use other colors, blue or black. There's no specification given there, green, yellow, or whatever the color that you can, a customer can use. Even a pencil, even red color. Clear? Okay, I think that's the answer for that. So any color that you can use, pencil you can use, right? So because it is not defined, it says ink or typewritten, right? Ink means any color of ink. Typewritten, you know that you can typewrite by using blue, rather black and red, right? Printed check forms, that we are talking about the printed check forms. Law says customer can issue a check in any form, any paper that he can use, but it has to be a paper because it's a physical written document, right? So in future it could be changed. We don't know whether electronic forms of checks will come in future. For the time being, then we have to change the law also accordingly. However, for the time being, at the present, the situation is it has to be a physical document. There is a condition there. If a bank refuses to accept any other forms of checks other than the forms issued by the bank has to give notice to the customer. Right? So we actually, in practice, we give that notice to the customer, because at the time of opening the current account, you go through the current account terms and conditions. I'm sure that many of you have not read the terms and conditions, even though bankers, right? The terms and conditions, there is a condition to say that the customer has to issue checks using the formats or the check leaf given by the bank. No other forms will accept it. So that is mentioned in the terms and condition. If it is not mentioned in the terms and condition, at least it has to be mentioned in the checkbook. But correct way is that you have to give prior notice to the customer before he issue the check. So therefore, unless the bank has given that notice, customer can issue checks in any form. So if you go to the history, right, the printed check forms came later, but initial stages, the customers, they actually draw checks in papers, even bills of exchange also like that, right? So that is one legal point that I want to highlight here. Then the next one, signature of the drawer. Signature of the drawer is another important feature of a check, right? So these features, these important features that we call them material features of a check. If these material features of a check are altered, then check becomes null and void, right? The signature of the drawer is important. A check has to be signed by the drawer personally or by the authorized signatory. What does it mean by that? Personally, of course, if it is an individual account, current account, that person personally has to sign the check, right? Or he can authorize somebody else. Example, he can appoint a power of attorney holder to operate his account. So then that power of attorney holder as the authorized signatory can operate the account or rather issue checks. If it is a corporate customer, right, a company, you know, a company is not a natural person. The account is maintained under the company's name. We say Pereira and Sons Private Limited, right? So that's not a natural body. That's a legal body. So the account is maintained under the Pereira and Sons Private Limited. So Pereira and Sons Private Limited can't sign. So the company, authorize somebody in the company to issue checks, right? So when a company appoint an authorized signatory, they give sometimes they put limitations. They put monetary bars. For example, if a clerk issue checks, the clerk sometimes given authority to issue checks up to 100, as example, 100,000. So if the value exceeds 100,000, it has to sign by the accountant. Likewise, there can be a limitation. There can be limitation imposed on that. If that signatory exceeds the limit and issue a check, that kind of check is considered, or the signature is considered unauthorized signature. So the unauthorized signature, there can be two types of unauthorized signature. One is completely unauthorized. That means that person is not given authority by the company to sign checks. That person signed. So that is an unauthorized signature. The second type is person is given the authority to issue checks, but he has given a limit. He exceeds the limit and issue checks. That is also considered as an unauthorized signature, right? So then can be signed in ink, in pencil, or mechanically, or by rubber stamp. These are the method that a customer can sign a check, right? By ink, that is the common way that we know. right? Customer side by ink means by using a pen, okay, right? Then pencil. If you can write a check in pencil, you can sign also. So that is also possible. Then mechanically. So check can be signed mechanically. Have you seen mechanically signed checks? Right? Example. So if you have seen dividend checks issued by the company to pay dividends to the shareholders, right? So then in a check, in those checks, dividend checks, you can see the signature of the authorized signatory of the company is printed on the check. Is printed on the check, right? It's printed on the check. So that is called mechanically signed checks. The other one is rubber stamp. You can use rubber stamp to place the signature. That means the signature of the authorized signatory is cut in the rubber stamp. When they issue checks, they put that seal on the place where the signature has to place. Right? Example, you may have seen, bankers may have seen this. You know that we have law firms, we have accountancy firms, audit firms, right? Sometimes most of them are partnership, right? So their accounts are maintained under their business name. For example, we say Paul Ratnayake Associates, right? Account is maintained by, we say, clerk. So that is the authorized signatory. But signature, he signed as a Paul Ratnayake Associates. Or sometimes they use a seal, a rubber seal. The signature of Paul Ratnayake Associates, the name is cut in there, and they place the signature, ink signature on the place by using the rubber stamp. That is also possible, right? But this is important. Typewritten signature is not accepted, right? That don't ask why, but that what law says. You can use a seal, but you can't typewrite the account holder's name at the place. Sorry, at the place where you have to place your signature. Right. Then the signature can be a fiction name or even a trade name. What does it mean? Right? Signature can be a fiction name. It's like this, right? We say I am Sunil Pereira, right? Sunil Pereira's signature does not want to carry the name, right? For example, if I am Sunil Pereira, I can sign I can place my signature as PL Pereira or Donald Duck or even Donald Trump, right? So it doesn't, law doesn't say that I have to sign my name. I have to sign. My signature can carry a name or carry any mark or something like that, right? So it could be even a fiction name or even a trade name. Example, trade names, as I told you, the law firms and also accountancy firms, they are signing as Nimal Pereira Associates. Nimal Pereira Associate, as you know, it's a firm or trade name that they sign as, right? Then the next question is whether a customer can have more than one signature. Can someone answer? Any banker? Can a customer have more than one signature? Can a customer have more than one signature? Please. Can someone answer? Bankers? Okay, answer is yes. A customer can have more than one signature, right? Signature is important to the bank to identify the instructions of the customer, right? Instructions of the customer. A customer who has more than one account with the bank can have different signatures to operate different accounts. For example, we say I have two current accounts. Current account number 1 and current account number 2. So I give instructions to the bank by using my signature in singular, right? For the current account number 1. The second account that I use my English signature, right? So that is possible. That is possible. Then next question is whether a customer can change the signature time to time. That is also possible, right? Customer can request to the bank to change his signature. So what you have to do is you have to get a signature card fresh, and also that you have to feed that signature into the system. So time to time also it can be changed. So those are some points that you have to remember. A company check can be signed by the agent of the company or authorized officer of the company. So that I think that I don't want to explain it again, right? The company check can be signed by the authorized signatory or the agent of the company. The check is signed in the name of a partnership. Each partner is liable on the check. That is another legal point that you have to remember. If it is a partnership account, if one partner signs a check on behalf of the partnership, even though others partners have not signed the check, they are bound by the check, because that is the partnership law. So one partner's act bind other partners of the partnership, right? If you have any questions that you can ask, you can unmute your microphone and ask. So if you don't have questions, then I'll go to the next one. What is specimen signature? What is specimen signature?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
For a non-personal customer, when the check is issued, the rubber stamp is a must or not?
Right. Good question. Okay. Natural customer means either it could be a company or a partnership or proprietorship, right?
Or even association.
Pardon me.
Even an association like an
even an association like an association or also, right? The question is whether it's a must. The seal, right? It is not a legal requirement, right? It is not a legal requirement. Even without the seal, if director sign and write under the signature director, that is sufficient. That is sufficient, right? In the capacity of the director, he can sign and he can write that. It's not a must, but as a practice, banks insist to use the seal because of two reasons. One is, as I told you, banker has the obligation to act without negligence and in good faith. So you have to protect the right of the customer. Who is the customer? Customer is the company or the firm. So therefore, if a director or partner is misusing the funds of the firm or the company, right, we can insist them that you have to bring the company seal or rather company seal and place the company seal. Then we can at least take some precautions to prevent frauds. That's why we say that you have to bring the seal. Or otherwise, it's not a legal requirement. The customer, rather the authorized signatory, can sign the check without the rubber seal, and when he signed, and you can put a bracket and say director there, so that is sufficient. But the issue is when you take rather specimen signature. In the specimen signature, if you put the seal and the signature, right, then we have a problem, because then you have to tally with the specimen signature together with the check. So then we have an issue. Otherwise, it is not a must. Okay, clear?
Yes, thank you.
Right. So then please unmute your mic. Right. Okay, what is a specimen signature? Specimen signature, why do we need a specimen signature? Specimen signature, the signature of the account holder or authorized signatory given to the bank. For what purpose? To identify his future instructions. So signature given in a mandate or the signature card, we considered as the specimen signature. Signature of the check should be confirmed with the specific signature or rather specimen signature. So that's what we do. So we take the signature of the customer at the mandate or on the mandate, or we have a separate signature card, and we scan it and we feed that into the system. When a check comes, what we do when you are paying the check, so we tally the signature of the check together with the specimen signature given to us. Then the question is, how do you identify the correctness of the signature? Is it necessary to identify 100%, or do we have to be expert bankers? Do we have to be expert in identifying the signature? Right? The test in quotes is called general man's test. That means if you are not, forget about that you are a bank, right? If you are a normal person's test, we call it, right? If you are a normal person, if you tally these two, if you satisfy the signatures are both same, that is the test the court going to apply. Like for example, so judge will take both into his hand and he will see whether there is whether those are similar. If he feels is the general man or a normal person, so he believes that both are same or similar, so that is enough. But obviously if he sees there is a difference between these two signatures, and if you have not observed that, that is clear negligence. So then that is the test applies. So what I want to tell you here is, you don't want to be the masters, or you don't want to be detectives of identifying signatures. You have to identify the signature or tally the signature in your naked eye, that if you still satisfy that test is enough to obey the instruction of the customer, right? If the signatures are not tallied, the banker should refer the checks to the drawer or return the check with the remarks signature differs. The signature, that if the signatures are not tallied, that means the specimen signature and the check signature not tally, that what you have to do, you have to return the check. Remember, return remark is very important. You have to put signature differ remark, don't put refer to drawer, right? So that is a wrong. If you put a wrong return remark, there can be a repercussion. the customer can demand damages from the bank if you put wrong remarks, right? That is with regard to the specimen signature. Then we have situation where customer is illiterate. We have customers, they are illiterate, they can't write, right? We have businessmen, millionaires, they have never gone to a school. They don't know how to write. Sometimes they can't even write their name, right? In a situation like that, a person illiterate, can a illiterate person maintain an account? Answer is yes. Literacy is not important point or important legal point or legal requirement to maintain an account. So illiterate person can maintain an account, right? Then the question is how he can write and how he can sign the check. Obviously, he can't write the check. Somebody has to write the check and he has to sign. So how can he sign? If he can't write the name, how he can sign? So he can sign he can sign by a mark, right? Mark means even across a circle is a mark. So therefore that can be considered as a signature. So then what is the situation? If it is a cross or if it is a circle, that you know that it's easily that can be forged by anyone. So what is your obligation as a bank? Your obligation as a banker, you have to act without negligence and in good faith. So you have to help the customer by helping him to issue checks. Same times you have to safeguard the bank interest and your interest. So what you have to do? There is a procedure to follow in a situation like that. So customer can sign by putting a signature, mark, cross or even a circle or whatever, right? Such signature should be witnessed by the banker and another witness known to the banker. So two witnesses, in front of the two witnesses that customer has to sign or place his mark, right? One such should be witnessed by the banker. You have to see, that means that the customer has to sign in front of you, and another witness known to you as two witness in case customer challenge in future days. So those witnesses are very crucial to be evidence in court.
Sir, I have a question. Can we apply that to the blind customer as well?
Good question. I will come to that, right? If customer is blind, what you can do is you can get his thumbprint, right? And before two witnesses. Clear? And the witnesses, one witness is you, the other witness is, right? The witness known to you. Why we take two witnesses? In case if customer challenge it, right? Then that witnesses has to come to courts and has to give evidence, has to testify to say that the check is issued for this value on the request of the customer, and the thumbprint or the mark or the signature placed before them. In any document, in any legal document, we take signatures before witnesses for that purpose. Guarantee bond, mortgage bond, power of attorney, any document, any legal document, we take signature of the executant before two witnesses or sometimes 5 witnesses. Why? If someone challenges the signature in future day, that witnesses has to come to courts and give evidence to testify the signature. That's why, right? So that is there. Then the next one, if the customer is too ill to sign, right? Take a situation like this. Customer, he has an account, current account holder, is good, is healthy, he is good, he is maintaining the account. All of suddenly he met with an accident. He meets with the accident and he is now paralyzed. He is paralyzed. You may have seen a situation like this, right? Now he can't operate the account. Now he can't operate the account because he is paralyzed. He can't sign. Without his signature, bank can't pay the check. Unless he sign the signature in the specimen signature, you can't. You know that he is sick. You know that he can't sign. Still you can't, as per the law. So in a situation like that, how do you operate the account? How he can operate the account? There are two ways, right? One method is he can make an application to courts and appoint a guardian on behalf of him, and that guardian can operate the account. That is one method. For that he has to file an action in courts and has to appoint a guardian, right, to operate his normal functions. So that includes banking functions also, right? Or he can get a court order directing the bank to release all the funds to the customer at once. So that means not operate the account. So you close the account and give the money to the customer. That is the other way. Third method, if the customer is illiterate, but he wants to maintain the account, issue checks, rather he is ill, right? So then in a situation like that, there is another process that we can follow, that is there given here. Can be signed by a mark. Mark includes a thumb impression also. Must be witnessed by the customer's doctor. Now different, right? Different now, right? Customer's doctor has to witness because he is too ill. He is too ill that he can't sign his signature. And another witness, two witnesses. One is the doctor. That there has to be another witness. And not only that, there is another important point. The doctor should give a certificate to certifying that his medical condition, that he is not in a position to sign his normal signature, and he placed his signature before me and also before another witness, that he has to certify. So these are the methods that a person who is too ill can maintain, or rather can do transaction in a current account. Right. Next one, if the drawer signature is forged, what will happen? Right? What do you mean by forge? Forge means if the account holder's signature is signed by any other person other than the account holder, it is called a forged signature, right? It could be the spouse. It could be a servant. It could be anybody, right? The forged signature is invalid. Forged signature not valid. Therefore, the check is void, invalid. In other words, the signature is forged. There is no check. There is no check. Right? So that you have to remember. There is no any other exception, right? Whether the signature is forged cleverly, whether it can be visible, whether it is so similar, nothing. Whether we can't identify the forged immaterial. So this is the principle. This is the law. If the signature is forged, check is not valid, wholly inoperative. Wholly inoperative. Wholly inoperative means check is not valid from the beginning. From the beginning. Right? What does it mean? It means there is no check issue. Check is not issued. There is no check. So any transaction done afterwards, no transaction will be valid. No transaction will be valid if the drawer's signature is forged. But there can be other signatures in the check which is forged. Now, for example, we say endorsement of a check. Drawer signature is not forged. Drawer draw the check, sign the check, given to the payee, payee endorse the check, given to the holder, or the payee given to the endorsee. Endorsee's signature forged by somebody. Now what is the situation? Now what is the situation? Check is valid. Check is valid up to the point of the forgery. So all the transaction happened in between are valid. But after that, the forged signature, the other transactions are not valid. That is the difference. That is the difference. Now, for example, we say someone, or say I take somebody's check leaf and forge the signature and use that check and purchase a land. Purchase a land. Now, this transaction is not valid. It's not valid. So, ownership of the property will not transfer to me because the check is not valid. Because the check is not valid. Right? That is the first example. Second example, say I have account, current account, I issue a check. So my signature is not forged. Drawer's signature is not forged. I purchase a land. I pay the value by a check. Now check is given to the seller. I purchase the land. Ownership of the land is transferred to me. The transaction is valid because the check is valid. Now we say it is account pay. It's a check payable to the payee, and he endorsed the check to a third party, or his signature is forged. Payee's signature is forged, and it is transferred or negotiated to another person. Then that person used the check and purchased a vehicle. Right? That transaction is not valid. That ownership of the vehicle will not transfer because the forgery of the check. So remember that signature of if the drawer's signature is forged, check is only inoperative, not valid from the beginning. Banker has no right to debit the drawer's account. This is the other point that you have to remember. If the check is signature of the drawer is forged, check is not valid, bank has no right to debit the customer's account. If the check is paid, right? If the check is paid, that means that you have not recognized the forged signature. It is so cleverly forged. For your naked eye, you can't see a difference, so therefore you pay. So what is the situation? What is the situation? The account holder has right to claim the money from the bank. So that means still the bank is liable to return the money to the customer. So in that point, we can't say that we can't recognize any difference between the signatures. So therefore we were not negligent or nothing. It's very clear, straightforward liability as per the Bills of Exchange Ordinance. The check for the signature of the drawer is forged. We have to return the money to the account holder. Then how do we recover our loss? We have to go behind the person who got the money. We can't say the customer that you go behind him and take the money. It's not the case. Law is very clear, right? If the forgery comes to the knowledge of the drawer, he has a duty to inform the bank ASAP. That is very important. That is one point or one legal principle that we can put the blame or with the put the liability on the customer, right? If the account holder If he knew the forgery and he didn't inform the bank about the forgery, then he is liable. So example, the Greenwood case. Greenwood case, what happened in this matter? Greenwood, in this case, husband maintained a current account and wife forged the signature. Husband came to know that wife has forged the signature, but he didn't inform the bank. Later, he found again his wife has forged the signature, and at that time, second time, he went to the bank and informed the bank that my wife has forged the signature. So therefore, it's a forgery, the forged signature, drawer's signature has forged. So therefore, return me the money. So that was his request. However, the bank rejected. The court held that if the bank is bound to return the money if the signature of the drawer is forged. That is the law, but subject to a condition. What is the condition? If customer or the account holder knows that his signature is forged, and if he has not informed the bank before the payment, then the customer is bound. He has to bear the loss. That is Greenwood theory. In section 24 of the Bills of Exchange Ordinance, very clear, and it says where the signature of the bill or the check is forged, the check or the bill is wholly inoperative, null and void from the beginning. Right? The case, I have mentioned a case here, Bank of Ceylon versus Kolonnawa Urban Council. In this matter, what was happened? One of the accountant or the clerk of the Urban Council, over a period of time, has forged the signature of the accountant and has taken money from the account. Then at one point, the Kolonnawa Urban Council realized that the signature of the authorized signatory has forged, and therefore they claim that money from the Bank of Ceylon. So, as per the section 24 of the Bills of Exchange Ordinance, law is very clear. When the signature is forged of the drawer, bank first has to return the money. So here, what happened? The Bank of Ceylon refused to pay, return the money. They said there is a negligence on the side of the customer because the customer has kept the checkbooks openly. So therefore, this clerk has stolen check leaves and has forged the signature of the authorized signatory. However, the court rejected that argument and said section 24 is very clear. Whether the customer is negligent or not is immaterial. Bank has to return the money to the account holder and has to recourse the money from the person who received. Then amount of the check. Amount of the check should be mentioned in words and also in figures. If there is a discrepancy, what is the situation between these two? Right? I have heard some people say that we pay the lower amount, not the higher amount. Or some people say we pay the amount mentioned in words, not in figures. But actually, if it is a check, it's different. The bank could seek confirmation from the drawer. So what you have to do, you can't say, if it is a bill, it's different. If it is a bill of exchange, the amount mentioned in words that we pay. When it comes to check, it is different. Right? You can't say that we pay the amount mentioned in words. Right? What you have to do is you have to get a confirmation from the customer. You have to confirmation customer. Or there is another option, the bank could dishonor the check with the remark, amount in words and figures are different, or amount required in words. So these remarks that you can put and you can return. So two things that you can do, two options available. get a confirmation from the customer, that is the account holder, and pay, or return with these two, one of these remarks. Then payment on demand. Check is payable on demand, not like a bill. Bill, you remember, when we issue a bill, it has a maturity date. Before it present for the payment, you have to present the check, so rather the bill, for the acceptance. Then afterwards, after the maturity date only, that has to be paid. Here the check is not like that. When the check is presented, it payable on demand. So that means that bank can't take time to pay or request time to pay. Checks are payable on demand. It is not compulsory or necessary to include the word on demand at site or on presentation. It is not necessary to use these words, right? Even though these words are not there, check is payable on demand. When it is presented, you have to pay. The check has to be drawn in the same currency in which the account was opened. So that means if you have a current account in rupees, that you can't issue checks in dollars, right? So same currency that we can issue the checks in the same currency where we maintain the account, the same currency that we, right? Customers are permitted to issue checks on the foreign currency account subject to foreign exchange laws. So if you are maintaining a foreign currency account, you can issue checks, but that is subject to the subject to foreign exchange laws. So subject to that only, that you can issue check. That means that you can't issue checks in a foreign currency account as you wish, right? There are limits, there are maximum limit that you can withdraw likewise, or you can issue checks, so subject to foreign currency foreign exchange laws. So up to this point, if you have questions that you can ask, then I'll go to the next one. Order checks and bearer checks. Order checks and bearer checks. Order checks, checks drawn to a specific person or to the order of a specific person. So when we writing a check, we can write a check, pay Nimal Pereira, or Nimal Pereira order. So such, that is the name of the payee that we mentioned as this, right? Such order we call as a order check. And the bearer check means a check drawn in favor of a person in a possession of a time being, using the word such as pay bearer. If we write a check using pay bearer, that means any person who bears the check can take the money. So such a check we call bearer check. Then date of the check. This is another important part that I want to discuss with you, right? Other things that you know, but date. It is important figure or important point of a check. Important part is, I have highlighted here, bold here, a check is not invalid by reason that it is undated. That you have to remember, right? If the check is not dated, don't say the check is invalid. Check is valid. Check is valid. Date of the check is important to us. Date of the check is important. Why it is important? Can someone say why it is important? The date of the check is important to the bankers. Why it is important? Can someone, any banker can respond to me? Why it is important?
That is the mandate. That is the mandate given by the customer to debit his account on the particular day.
Particular day.
Yes.
So now when we issue a check, right? We put the date normally. We say if I issue a check today, I issue the date. That is the today. Right? Check is a negotiable instrument that can be negotiated to any number of time, and it can be circulated among people, and it will come to the bank for payment, say we say after year, right? Will you pay? You got the point? Hello? Can you hear me?
Can't hear you, sir.
Yeah.
Hello?
So I issue a check today, right? And it's a negotiable instrument. I give to somebody and that person gives to someone else. Likewise, it negotiated, right? We say after 1 year's time, check comes for the payment.
Okay.
Will you pay?
No, but the reason is check is valid only for 6 months. So
Right.
when it present after 6
After
months,
6 months, we call the check as a stale check, right?
Yes.
So then check date of the check is important to the bankers to calculate the stale period or count the stale period. Check is valid in Sri Lanka for 6 months. Okay?
Okay.
So
So is that number? So
Yes.
is that number of days? So it's in months, because sometimes do we have to calculate in number of days or number of months? That 6 months period.
Yeah, good question. Good question, right? You can the drawer can limit the validity period of the check, right? You can put 30 days, you can put 60 days, or you can put 90 days. However, if the time is not limited, check is valid only 6 months. Are you clear?
Yes.
If check says it valid only 30 days, it valid only 30 days. But if it is not mentioned, it is valid only 6 months. It is valid only 6 months from which date? How do you calculate or how do you count 6 months? You count 6 months from the date mentioned on the check. From there, you have to calculate 6 months. If it is 30 days, you have to calculate 30 days from the date mentioned on the check. The actual issuance date could be different. Clear? So I will explain you, right? Now check could be dated. We can include the date in a check in 3 ways, right? That is, first one we call these checks dated checks, antedated checks, or post-dated checks. There are 3 types of checks. Dated check means I issue a check today and I put the date, today's date. So that is a dated check. Check is valid for 6 months from today. From today. After 6 months, stale check. Second type is antedated. Antedated means I issue a check today, I put a previous date. So January 1st, we say, or we say April 1st. So check is valid for 6 months from 1st of April, where the date of the check mentioned as 1st of April. So we have to calculate 6 months or count 6 months from 1st of April, not from the date of issuance. The other type is the post-dated check. Post-dated check means today I issue a check, but I put the date of the check as a future date. Say for example, August. 1st of August 2020. So check is valid for another 6 months. For another 6 months from 1st of April, 1st of August. Not from today. Not from today, because today is the issuance day. But check carries some other day, a future day. That is post-dated check. So all these types checks are valid in law. Even without a date, check is valid. Check is valid. After issuance a check, any holder can insert the date. Any holder can insert the date. Inserting a date is not a material alteration. So any holder before it present for the payment or collection, can insert the date if it is undated. The post-dated check is presented for the payment before the date. It should be returned with the remarks of post-dated. Post-dated checks are valid. Post-dated checks should be presented for the payment after the date mentioned in the check. What you have to do is you have to return the check if it is presented before the date with the remark of post-dated. What will happen if you pay by an oversight or by negligence or whatever, but you have not observed the date, right? It's a future date, but it is presented today, but you pay. What is the situation? Is it illegal, the payment? If it is illegal, you have to return the money. If the payment is illegal, you have to return the money to the customer, right? Now, however, if you pay a post-dated check before the date, the payment is not illegal. In other words, it's legal. Payment is legal, but subject to certain conditions. What are the conditions, right? If banker pays a post-dated check before it due, the bank has to bear any loss or damage that could arise out of the transaction or the payment. What does it mean, right? It's like this. Say I issue a check, it's a post-dated check, and I give this check to somebody. We say Nimal. Nimal, it's a post-dated check, it's dated 1st of August. Nimal, on Sunday, takes the check, it's a cash check, and present to the bank, bank pay. Now, it's a post-dated check, paid before. Payment is legal unless and until I don't dispute the payment, matter is over. So that means the payment is okay. I accept the parties discharge their liability on the bill. What will happen? Bank pay the check on Monday. On Tuesday, I give instructions to the bank stopping the check because it's supposed to pay in August. Now what is the situation? I have all the right to stop the check before the date. So then I present the instructions or give instructions to the bank to stop the payment. By that time, bank has paid. Now what is the situation? Now customer has challenged the payment. So in a situation like this, bank has to return the money to the customer, and you have to recourse. You have to go behind the person who received the money and recover the money from the person who received the money. Unless and until the payment is challenged, payment for a post-date check is legally valid. So, any questions on the date of the check? If you have, you can ask now. Okay, since there are no questions, then I go to the negotiation of a check. Check is negotiable instrument. Check is a negotiable instrument. Negotiable instrument means that you can use that instrument to pay a value. You can transfer the ownership of the instrument from person to person, right? That is the nature of, that is the characters of negotiability. Check can be negotiated by transferring from one person to another person to another. Just cut this word to another person, right? Section 31, a check or bill payable to bearer can be negotiated by delivery of the check. So there are two types of checks now, you remember, bearer checks and order checks. Bearer checks and order checks. If it is a bearer check means any person, any bearer can encash the check. So such a check, how do you negotiate? So just hand over the physical check is enough. Transfer the ownership, right? That is enough. That is called delivery of check. Then the second type, payable to order check, is negotiated by the endorsement of the holder and complete by the delivery. Two parts. If it is a order check, two steps or two conditions to fulfill. One, it has to be endorsed. The payee has to endorse. Endorse means you have to sign, the payee has to sign the backside of the check. Endorse in Sinhala, we call it Pitasana. Pitasana. Check patehi Pitasana atsan. Pitupasa atsankini. Right? But as a practice, I have seen banks says that they don't ask the signature. They ask you to write your name in flowing letters. Right? That is a practice that they are now as accepted in law as an endorsement. If it is a order check, to negotiate, two steps to follow: endorse and deliver. If it is a bearer check, just deliver is sufficient. Right. Then the endorsement. Endorsement, as I said, right? If it is a bearer check, the bearer or the payee has to endorse the check by signing the check, the back side of the check. So there are three types of endorsement. The first one is blank endorsement. The other one is special endorsement and restrictive endorsement. These are the three types of endorsements. What is blank endorsement? Blank endorsement means endorsement which does not specify an endorsee. Check becomes payable to the bearer. We say now there is a check. We say there is a check, right? It says pay 250 to N Pereira, right? So this is the N Pereira owed, right? So N Pereira, this is an order check, right? Now N Pereira is the payee. We say Nimal Pereira is the payee. Nimal Pereira wants to negotiate this check to somebody. We say Sunil Pereira to Sunil Pereira. So what he has to do, just delivery of the check will not sufficient, because then Sunil Pereira will not be able to get money because his name is not mentioned on the check. So what Nimal Pereira has to do, the bearer or the payee, he has to sign the backside of the, this is the face, this is the backside of the check. So he has to sign here. He said Nimal Pereira signed here, backside. This is endorsement. Without any word, without specifying the endorsee, he signed, just signature. Then that type of endorsement is called blank endorsement. Now what happened to the check? Initially it was a order check. Bearer, or rather the payee, put a blank endorsement. Now the check is a bearer check. Status change. So any bearer can take money now. It become a bearer check. Right? That is blank endorsement. Special endorsement. Second type is special endorsement. Endorsement specify to whose order the check is payable. So Nimal Pereira endorsed the bill, or rather the check, signed the backside of the check and named the endorsee. So he named Sunil Pereira. So this is the endorsee. Now this type of endorsement is called special endorsement. Special endorsement. Now initially it was a order check. Now also it is an order check, and endorsee is named. Only Sunil Pereira or his order can take the value of the check. Then the third type of endorsement is restrictive endorsement. A bill or the check bears an endorsement which prohibit further negotiation or transfer of ownership is called restrictive endorsement. And from the nature of the instrument or the check is it's a negotiable instrument. By putting an endorsement, a bearer or payee can restrict the negotiability of the instrument, right? For example, pay Nimal Pereira, or we say Sunil Pereira only. Further negotiation restricted. So Sunil Pereira can't negotiate the way. If this word is not there, it's not restrictive, then what is the situation? Sunil Pereira also can negotiate. So what he has to do, Sunil Pereira can sign here, right? Either blank endorsement or by special endorsement. So negotiate. We say he put a special endorsement and say Kamal Pereira. Special endorsement, negotiate. Restrictive, if you put a restrictive endorsement only, this is not possible. This is not possible because the further negotiation is restricted. These are the three types of endorsement with regard to checks. Then crossing of a check. Crossing also very important. Crossing means.
Can I ask a question, sir? Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Ask.
Sometimes now, if a check is payable to a non-personal customer, let's say it's a partnership or a proprietorship, can it be transferred by endorsing?
Can it be
transferred by endorsing?
If it is okay, Drover is a company.
Let's say it's a proprietorship or a partnership.
Okay, or proprietor, we say it's a proprietor, or we say proprietor, or we say partnership. Okay, we say Drover is the partnership and issue of check, right? So and given to Sunil Pereira is the payee, right?
No, payee is also a partnership or a proprietorship.
A payee also a partnership. Yes. Law doesn't say. There's no restriction. Even the payee is a non-natural person. There's no restriction like that, right? So then the company or the partnership or proprietorship can endorse it and it can negotiate. But in practical way, how do you? I mean, the bankers, how do you do that? Do you accept endorse?
Generally, we accept not limited liability company, but if it's a partnership or a proprietorship, we accept.
You accept?
We can negotiate.
Okay, so there, under the law, there is no restriction like that. Even a company can do, but why you have any idea why you don't accept a company endorsed checks?
Because it's a separate legal entity, so we don't now even the check is payable to a company, whether it's a bearer check or a order check, we pay only to the particular company, not to any other party.
You don't pay third parties, right?
Yes.
That is the reason. Okay. Anyway, as per the law, as per the Bills of Exchange Ordinance or the law related to check, there is no restriction like that. But there are principles or there are practices that we have established by the bank. So therefore, it might not accept, but there is no restriction under the law. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Then crossing of a check. Crossing. What do you mean by crossing? Crossing means it's a instructions given. It's an instruction given to the bank. Which bank? It is an instructions to the collecting bank, and as well as it is an instruction given to the paying bank. What is crossing? Crossing is defined in the Bills of Exchange Ordinance, right? crossing is a two transitive parallel lines on the face of the check. On the face of the check. Two parallel lines on the face of the check. That means that you can't cross the back side of the check. Right? Crossing is an instruction. Crossing is an instruction. Instructions to the bank. What is the instruction of given by the customer or the bearer? The check should not pay over the counter. It has to pay, it has to collect to account. That is the instruction. When you see the crossing, that you have to identify that instruction. Right? There are two types of checks. One is open checks and cross checks. Right? Cross checks cannot be paid over the counter. It has to be cleared through an account. What is a crossing? Crossing, as per section 76 of the Bills of Exchange Ordinance, two parallel transitive lines across the face of the check constitute crossing. So now you know, you can't put 3 parallel lines, you can't put 4 parallel lines. It is 2 parallel lines and on the face of the check and transitive. Right? So then it creates a crossing. Right? So that section 76 of the Bills of Exchange Ordinance. The drawer or any holder, by crossing the check, instruct the collecting bank to collect the check to a bank account. So drawer initially can cross the check, or even later any bearer also can cross the check. So that is the instructions to the collecting bank to collect the check to her account. If the banker fails to observe this order, the customer can object to the amount to be debited to his account. The bank has to bear the loss. So same here. So instructions given to the bank. If bank fails to observe this instruction and pay the check over the counter, the customer can object. So customer can say, return my money. I have given you instructions to pay through account, but you have paid over the counter. It's a cross check. So therefore, return my money. So he has all the right to demand that money. In a situation like that, bank has to return the money. Again, the same principle apply. If customer won't challenge the payment, payment is valid. Payment is valid. Crossing is a material part of a check. It is a material part of the check. That means if crossing is altered, check is null and void. Null and void. For example, if it is a cross check, if someone erase the crossing, that is an alteration, material alteration. Material alteration. I have a case that the bearer has used some chemical and has erased the crossing. Erased the crossing. So bank has paid. Obviously, bank can't see the crossing. So, however, it was proved in courts that the customer at the time of issuing the check, it was crossed because he had a photocopy of the check. So then ultimately he challenged the payment. The bank had to return the money to the customer, that is the account holder. Then bank has to go and recover the money from the person who received it. Right? So it is very important. If it is a cross check, don't pay over the counter, that you have to obey the instruction. Types of crossing. Right? Section 76 says, right, there are two types of crossings. One is general crossing, the other one is special crossing. General crossing means that two parallel transitive lines on the face of the check, with or without word, not negotiable. Right? This is a general crossing. Also, so you can cross a check like this, two parallel lines with not negotiable words. Both these are general crossing. The instruction given here is to the bank not to pay over the counter, or not to collect, has to collect to a account. These are the instructions given. The other type of Crossing is, we call it special crossing. Two parallel lines again. In between these two parallel lines, you put a name of a bank. Name of a bank. HNB. This type of crossing we call it special crossing. Right? This is an additional instruction given to the bank. What is that? Right? That instruction is the check should not pay over the counter. It has to be collected to an account. It has to be collected to an account maintained at HNB bank, no other bank. So commercial, Sampath or any other bank cannot collect this check to account. Only HNB can. So further we can specify more. We can say we can put a branch also. Say Nugegod. Right? HNB Nugegod. So now more specific. Only HNB Nugegod branch can collect this check to account. No other bank or even other branch of HNB can't collect the check if it is specifically crossed by the customer, by the account holder or any other bearer afterwards. So those are the types of crossings of a check. Not negotiable crossing, right? That means a general crossing with words not negotiable. Not negotiable. What will happen? Will not restrict the transferability of the check. Even the words they are not negotiable, the transferability of the check will not restrict. By putting a endorsement, yes, you can restrict, but by putting a not negotiable word in between two parallel lines, the crossing will not restrict the negotiability of the check. Holder shall not have a better title than the previous holder. That is the effect of the not negotiability. What does it mean? The holder will not have a better title than the previous holder, right? That means the check is negotiated. Check negotiated means I give the check to somebody else, negotiate for a value or as a gift or whatever I give. So then the new holder will get the title that I had, not a better title. For example, we say the check is given to me by a thief. The check is stolen, right? So then I don't have a title to the check. Then I can't give the title to the holder. So therefore, holder will not have a title. So if it is if this crossing says not negotiable crossing, then holder shall not be capable of giving better title than the previous holder had. Holder who had a defective title cannot retain the check against the true owner. What does it mean, right? It means the check is the benefit of the check should go to the true owner. If it is a stolen check, if it is crossed as not negotiated, a person who has no title to the check cannot give a better title to the other part, another person. Only the true owner is entitled to get the benefit of the case I have given here. This case that you can, if you can remember better, Nagpur Pichai versus Kanapati Pitte 66 NLR, right? So that means that if I explain what it is, right? We say A is the current account holder. He issue a check to B. We negotiate the check to C. The check is stolen from C by D and negotiate to E. Right? Take this transaction. We say this check is cross check with not negotiable words. Now, who is the true owner of the check? The true owner of the check is actually this person, right? From A to B, title change passed. From B to C, title passed. But from C to D, title did not pass because it's stolen. So it's not a legal method of acquiring the title. So therefore, afterwards, if it is a cross check with not negotiable, D can't give a better title to E. So E also will not get a title. So the true owner is C. He is the person who is capable of getting the benefit of the check. That is the effect of the not negotiable crossing. So that is a method of preventing frauds. Account payee crossing. Only the payee's account can be credited. This is not in the bills of exchange ordinance. Again, account payee crossing is not mentioned in the bills of exchange ordinance. This crossing has been developed by bankers now in the banking practice. Also, court also has accepted this, so therefore it has become a part of the law now. So we remember when we say the bills of exchange ordinance apply to checks and bills of exchange, bankers, we have our practices, we have developed our own practices. Those practices has become a law now because the court has accepted certain practices, not all, right? So this is one of those practices that we have practiced for a long period and which also has accepted by courts. Then who can cross a check? The drawer or payee or any subsequent holder can cross the check. Initially, the drawer can cross the check, or if it is not crossed by the drawer, it can be crossed by the payee, or any subsequent holder also can cross the check. Open check can be crossed by any holder, subsequent holder. When a check is crossed, generally a holder can cross any holder can later cross specially. For example, this check at the beginning it crossed generally, right? It comes to this person, that is the payee. Then the payee can put a name there, bank name. So that then general crossing, now it is a special crossing. So any holder can insert a bank name or even a branch name. That is not an alteration. Remember, that is you convert the general crossing into a special crossing. When the check is when the check is crossed generally or specially, holder can add the word not negotiable. So any holder can add these words. When the check is crossed specially to a bank, the bank can cross specially to another bank for a collection. So if it is specially crossed to this bank can cross the check specially to another bank for the collection purpose. That is also a practice developed by us, the bankers. Not in the bills of exchange ordinance, but as a practice we do. So then what happened? The next bank can collect the check. When uncrossed check or specially crossed check is presented for the collection, the bank can cross the check specially to the same bank. So you may have practiced this, right? When uncrossed check, that is open check, presented for the payment or collection. So what you can do, you can cross the check and you can cross the check specially. So for that I have seen banks use their seal. They place the seal on the face of the check. The seal contains two parallel lines and their bank name between the parallel lines. So that once you put that seal there, then the check is crossed specially to you. So that is another precaution or a precaution that you take to prevent frauds. Developed by bankers and accepted by courts. Then collection of checks. Collection of checks. Okay, time is 5:25. So I have another 5 minutes only. So if you have any questions up to now, that you can ask the questions. So we will continue our lesson next day from this point onwards, that is collection of checks. If you have any questions, that you can ask now. Up to now.
When a crossing is cancelled on a check, to whom we
Yes.
can pay it? Should it pay to the payee or to the holder or to the
When
drawer?
the crossing is cancelled, it becomes an open check, right? So then it can be paid to any bearer, any holder, right? You may have heard this, all crossings are cancelled.
Yes, all crossing cancelled.
All crossing cancelled. So that means when the crossings are cancelled, it is then uncrossed check. That is an open check, right? So the bearer can take the money. Yeah.
But as a practice, we pay it to the drawer or to his non-agent.
You
As
pay to
bank.
the drawer,
Or his non-agent.
non-agent.
Yes, otherwise we ask for a confirmation from the drawer. Is there a legal implication or legal?
No, there is no legal requirement like that. As I told you, there are practices that we have developed, which has now accepted by the courts also. As you said, this is another practice that you have. Why can you explain why do you pay it to the drawer? So his
according to our knowledge,
use the check, right?
yeah, because according to our knowledge, there's no specific provision in the bills of exchange ordinance for crossing cancelled. So
Yes,
that's why we
I saw.
generally,
There is no provision. There is no provisions to cancel the crossing and the bills of exchange ordinance. That is correct, because it says how do you cross, but how do you cancel the crossing is not mentioned there. There is no provision to cancel the crossing also. So if you, as I told you before, if you erase the crossing, that is an alteration, right? But when you put a all crossing cancel, that is a practice developed by the bankers to cancel the crossing. When you cancel the crossing, actually, if you argue, that becomes a bearer check, right? So my question is, when you cancel the crossing, what is the reason that you pay that to the drawer only, or to his agent? So that means that you are paying to the account holder.
Account holder, or he's
Yes.
not like employee or
So you get a confirmation from the drawer and pay to an agent. If he
agent,
confirm.
or it is if you are going to pay to the payee, we get a confirmation also.
What about the bearer? Don't you pay to the bearer?
If the drawer confirms, we honor that.
Right. That's a practice that you develop, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. I will check that that is a practice, but not in the bills of exchange ordinance.
Okay.
However, I will check that next date, and I will further explain to you.
Right, sir.
Okay.
There's another practical question, sir. Now, sometimes when the check is presented, if it's an order check, now pay doesn't come to the bank. Instead, the third party, or let's say holder, comes with the check with the endorsement. We have a should we check the endorsement whether it's a regular, or should we check it actually is placed by the payee, or is there any legal concern there?
Your question is whether you have to check the endorsement, whether the endorsement, the signature is basically placed by the holder or the payee.
Yes, right. Yes.
No, there is no requirement like that, and also you can't find the bearer or the payee. Now, for example, we say if the check is negotiated for 100 times, and if there are say 50 endorsements, you can't go behind all these people and get the confirmation of their endorsement. Not practical.
That's right.
right? So it is not necessary and it is not required under the law. So what you have to see is whether it has been endorsed. That means if there is a signature, or normally what your practice is, you ask the person to write his name, no?
Yes, we ask them to sign the now if it's a payee's name, it should be if the endorsement in English, flowing letters likewise, we ask them to endorse it on the reverse side.
Yeah, reverse side, he has to write the name in flowing letters, right?
Letter, yes.
Actually, not the signature.
Not the signature, yes.
Not the signature. Do you get the identity card number also?
Yeah, sometimes, but now in such situations, even though it's a order check, we pay only to the payee, not to the holder. When
Okay. Right. So if I answer your question, there is no legal requirement you to check the endorsement, whether it's a correct endorsement or whether it's signed by actually the payee or holder. It's not a legal requirement. So therefore, no negligence on the banker's side if you have not checked the validity of the endorsement. Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so then we'll stop at this point. We'll start from this point onwards on the next day. Thank you very much for listening.